Hello everybody, welcome to a new video. Today we're going to be making a Nintendo Zapper. I don't know if anybody remember these things. They were quite popular in the 80s with the original Nintendo 8-bit. They were used among other things to the game Duck Hunt. I stumbled across this picture, I guess, on the internet somewhere, and I thought, wow, I mean, brings me back, so I thought it'd be a great thing to model. As far as I could see, there was two different variations of this Zapper. There was a grey and an orange version. As far as I can see, both are pretty much identical except for the colour. I think I read somewhere there's maybe some issues around the original grey version being mistaken for a real weapon, so it was re-released again in the orange colour just to maybe save any kind of incidents. So this video is going to be broken up into two different versions, part 1 and part 2. The part 1 we will focus on making the barrel of the Zapper, which is fairly simple. We will do a split down the middle of the barrel, so it actually looks like two pieces of plastic set together. Pretty much the same for the whole gun, really. And then we will focus on the lighter grey bit, the slide in the middle here, and that's going to be quite a heavy boolean workflow just to get the right shapes. And then there will be some clear up mesh going on there also, and then we'll round up the video with just the trigger, and then part 2 will just be the handle and the wire, among other things, maybe the screws. There also will be an additional part I've already filmed where I'm going to actually texture this thing in Marmoset, so that's something which will come in the future. So yeah, we'll jump over and get to it. Okay, first things first, we're going to set up the actual size of the Zapper. I did some small amount of research and found out it's roughly around, see what we put in here, 286 millimeters. With a depth of 34 and a height of 150, roughly. You know what it's like with the internet. I mean, maybe not necessarily exactly the right dimensions, but I mean, as long as it's not as big as a car, it's fine. So when we get our reference image and scale in, so we're basically on the real world scale here. The sizing is mainly important when we are using textures and also bevels. They can go a bit crazy if you're making maybe a gun which is the size of a car, and when you reset your transforms before exporting, it might go a bit crazy. You have to excuse me if I sound a little bit hoarse. I've been a little bit sick recently, so I'm not completely recovered. So maybe you hear me sniff a little bit here, but you have to grin and bear with it. So from what I can see here, it looks like the front and the back of the barrel seems to be one large piece. And that's how we start out, but I do actually separate them later because it seems to be, it's either our references or how I build it, it seems to be a little bit consistent. I'm not sure if the back piece maybe is a little bit larger than the, I mean obviously the back piece is larger, but I'm not sure if it kind of scales up. It was a little bit difficult to see, so we make it work. And it's not so visible. I did my normal in-depth research and tried to check out as many images as I could, and it was nigh on impossible to find. So here we use the knife tool to help us out. When you use a knife tool, if you use C, then it's cut through, which is very important. It's rarely you want to use the knife tool where you're not using the cut through. And here we fill out the back, just a temporary solution. It will change again later. Here we're just estimating the depth. I couldn't find any accurate measurements on this, so we're pretty much just eyeballing it. It's also one of the hardest things I do. I did a search for some models here, and you do find thickness and depth of things becomes quite hard to judge. And I've seen some pretty nice models, but you see some of the plastic looks quite thin. So here we're just making some cuts because we want to extrude down the bottom part here, and again just going by references. I have a second screen where I'm just trying to eyeball the width of this thing. Then we flatten out the bottom. It's quite a simple part of the process here, nothing crazy. We just need to add the geometry to make our extrusions. And same for the upper piece here, where we're going to extrude the sight, I guess it is. Just trying to work out how thick this piece is also. Ultimately these, it's this which makes or breaks a model. I mean, it's extremely hard sometimes to find good references, and quite a lot of the time you're just really going from what you see, and it could be quite hard. I mean, if you really haven't got an eye for things, then life will get very hard when you're doing 3D. I mean, it is very much a visual game. So here we're going to use the flatten selection. It's part of the loop tools add-on, which I rely on quite a lot. I do find I use a few add-ons, but really use their functions sparingly. I should probably sit down and do a deep dive and trying to learn how to use all these add-ons properly, but what generally happens is I'll see somebody else use a function and I'll just keep using that function and then don't really explore as much. So here we're going to do the rear sight, which is essentially two pieces on the left and the right. So here we'll just build the one side and then we'll use either the mirror modifier or what is the name? Symmetrize. I swear to God, my memory is terrible. So remember to reset your transformation rotations before you symmetrize. Here I'm just checking the reference. I feel these need to be a little bit thicker. So we're gonna, and also a little bit closer, so we're gonna see if we can scale them in. We need to be a little bit mindful of our cylinder. We don't want to destroy the roundness of it too much. And then we're just going to add a temporary round detail here, which is essentially where the screw connects with two pieces of plastic. And again, eyeballing the width. It feels a little bit too thick maybe, but I go to the reference and I'm pretty sure it's roughly the same width as the bit protruding at the bottom. Which for some reason kind of feels like it should do. I'm not too sure why. No, we reduce it anyway. So from what I can see from this gun, we have screws on one side but not on the other side, but the plastic is pretty much identical. I guess it's a manufacturing thing. Like it's just cheaper to produce two mirror images of the plastic. So here we're going to use a boolean to cut out the screw hole. And these are always a little bit tricky because we essentially have a screw cutting into a round surface. And here I add another reference just so I can try and get rough positions of these screws. And we need to be mindful of where our cuts end up because we're going to have to stitch this together. And an issue will always be our geometry. Right now we have quite low amount of geometry, which will help us. the worst thing you can do is go high geometry, because you'll be forever trying to make this stuff work. So here I'm also using a add-on called Ball Tool, I think it's called, which is essentially allows you to use Control Plus and Control Minus, I think, to add or take away a boolean. So the front piece, we're just going to try and do a little bit of work to stitch things together. Just as best we can without destroying our geometry. So what we do here, we start to get things together, and then I kind of realise that we could make things a lot better, so we do try to pick things apart and correct the geometry a little bit. So here we have some pretty good connection points here. It doesn't disturb our model too much. But you see we have these two slanted edge loops coming from the top, and ideally it would be better if those were coming straight down into our screw hole. And that is ultimately what we will correct very soon. But to do it, the most easiest thing to do would be to remove this top piece here, because it's just going to get in our way. So if we press P to separate it, so then we're just working on this piece here. So now we're free to make some bigger changes, and then we'll stitch in the top piece again at the end. Apologies for the crazy spinning around the screen. I guess it could be quite disorientating, but just trying to get a good view of things. So here now we will do a knife cut through both meshes. If you press A, it will lock itself to an angle. And we're also using the snap tool at the top here, snap into the vertices. See, now we're getting a little bit better geometry here, something which makes a little bit more sense. And then for my own peace of mind, we just straighten things up here. So now we bring back the top piece here and connect them, and then we're going to see if we can connect them again properly in a more sensible way. Looks like we have some double geometry here. It's nothing advanced here really, we're just trying to make things look a little bit nicer. Feel free to skip forward if you find this kind of thing boring. It's quite easy to make a model, it's a bit harder to make a nice model. I like to take the time to just make sure things are built well. See, we still have some double geometry here. It's essentially where we reattached the top piece, which is a bit of a pain, but so now we're using the function check to see if we can find any non-manifold faces, and this is good to see if you have any internal geometry, anything which shouldn't be where it was. You can see there we had an internal face, so nothing highlights now, so this is a completely nice watertight piece of mesh. And now we add a bevel just to see how we're looking. Right now it's a little bit too big. I like to use the select weight instead of the angle, just so we have a little bit more control over what our bevel modifier is doing. It takes a little bit more time to define the edges. But here right now we've got a little bit too close geometry, which we can fix, but also the bevel is still too big. We're up on 1mm, it's unnecessarily big. So here is mainly just problem solving, trying to find where the overlapping, these black pieces are where essentially the bevels are too close to each other, so they're overlapping each other. So if we shrink certain pieces, then it gives the bevel modifier more room to bevel. So essentially what you will see is if you reduce the size of a bevel, the issues will go away, but then maybe you have the mesh will look too sharp. So then you would have to change the geometry slightly. Perfect example, down here we have way too many edges too close to each other, so we can just delete a few edges down here just to give some room. Make sure we select all the edges here. So we get there in the end. I still think it's maybe a bit too big the bevel. So we're starting to get somewhere here. So what I'm going to do now is delete half of the mesh, and we shall eventually give depth to it. See, and this is something I think is quite important. We added a mirror modifier, and now we have a seam in the middle, which is exactly how this thing is made. It's two pieces of plastic which are screwed together, and we need to make sure we have that in our model also, because the reflection of that seam will be very evident, and it will really help us in selling our model. We'll jump back to it and do the thickness, but right now we're going to jump over to the slide and make a start here. And again we add in another reference, which is good just for top and bottom view. It's the most important thing is trying to get the main shape of the object before you start to make any kind of minor changes. Because it's obvious, I guess, but quite a few times you do maybe get bogged down in the details. And it becomes difficult. So always focus on your big shapes first. A perfect example is getting the shape from above, which it kind of bevels in, and if we had did that after what we're doing right now, which I actually did do the first time I made this, this is the second time I modelled just this piece, it becomes an absolute nightmare trying to get that curve, the slanted plastic. So here's a good example of how to build this piece, if I do say so myself. You do solve a lot of problems by just trying to plan. You can see here now, right, because of the geometry we don't have any like a flat edge on the side here, and it should be flat. So now we need to pull it out. And we can use our flatten tool here. So now we can see we have the big shape fixed. Now I'm being a bit lazy, I just rotated the mesh instead of re-adding the reference from the bottom. It's because I know I'm not going to use this reference very much at all. I'm going to delete it quite soon. And you can see with the shading we've again lost the shape. So now we need to flatten again. A flatten tool is very, very good for maintaining our shapes. And sometimes you need to add a loop cut just so, because I mean, even if you try to flatten stuff, it still needs to be able to work with the geometry. And here we add some booleans, which will eventually be the screw holes. And of course not exactly a curved surface, but a slightly difficult surface because we have this crease right in the middle. So we need to be aware of where we collapse these booleans. So here what we want to do these ridges at the top, so I steal some geometry from the main slide and then we increase it upwards. Essentially stealing the geometry just helps us keep that angle. And that's what it looks like if you do not press C. For some reason it would not cut through. So this is a very interesting design. I mean, these shapes are a little bit weird. They kind of, every other one is kind of a little bit smaller, a little bit bigger. So we'll try and get the main shape of the first one. And we can see we're a little bit off on the angle. And our snap tool save us again here. So we'll set the origin to the geometry, and then we will add ourselves an array, which is I think the best option to save us reproducing this piece multiple times. We'll just see if we can use the array. And then we will collapse and try and edit ourselves. I'm not sure why. I mean, I've tested the relative and the offset here. I'm not sure which one is really the best option here. So now we count out and we need 9. And clearly we can see that we're a little bit too thin because our 9 does not come all the way to the end here. And scaling is not really working because we have reset our rotation. So we're going to have to just do this old school drag X to get it into the roughly right size. So now we have our slices here, but as we said, every other one is a different, different width. And it's a little bit hard to try and work out exactly how we think these things look. I mean, this is kind of the kind of object you want to have in your hand, so you can try and, I mean, looking at reference, trying to work out how this is built is a little bit difficult. Sometimes I like building stuff which actually I own, so I can just like measure things. So now we apply the modifier, and we can see they're kind of overlapping still a little bit, which was not so great. So then we back up and re-edit the array so we get as close as we can. We don't want any overlapping geometry because we're going to have to collapse all of this and stitch it together. And we're going to have internal faces. So now we test again. You can tell already we have some very tight geometry. It could cause some havoc with our bevel modifier, so we're just trying to space things out a little bit, but obviously trying to keep to our reference. And we add our small bevel here. But the bevel does actually disappear here, so we need to repair the front piece. When we collapse at the back, so then we have our little triangle. This is very, very much an 80s design. I mean, you're just looking at this Zapper and it just screams 80s. So now we bring back our barrel, because what we need to do is start to remove geometry. This barrel we want to fit inside the top piece. So here we can see very much that we have misaligned sizes, so we're going to have to need to shrink somewhere. And this is where I decide that separating the back barrel from the front barrel is probably the best option, so we're not resizing too much. So you can see here we try and shrink in the width a little bit, but we want to keep the height, but also at the same time we want to keep it a cylinder. So we're kind of like fighting forward and back here, just trying to, because every time we resize it, it kind of spreads out on the width here, so we will try to, we're trying to keep the proportion of the cylinder and find like a happy medium. And again, this is something I find really important. I've seen quite a few models where people have pretty much just stuffed this barrel intercepting the plastic underneath, and I think that's fine. I mean, if this is going to be viewed from quite a distance, you'll get away with that, no problems. But I mean, if you want to have a close up of this thing, you really need to have be able to see like the separation in the plastic. So here we're just going to build a hole for the trigger. And we can use our reference from the bottle here, bottom. And we'll tidy up the geometry a little bit later. There's more to add here, so you don't need to get too deep with this. So I think I decided here the best option was maybe not just boolean this part away from the mesh, and that be a better idea would be just to add some cuts. If we did boolean it away, we would have a lot of circular geometry at the bottom of this piece of plastic, which is a hell of a lot of unnecessary. You will not see the rounding at the bottom, so whereas it would work maybe very well for a 3D print because you have the actual geometry, visually we do not need to have that, so I will just do a square cut downwards, so above you see what it is, but maybe not below. So here we just want to flatten this out again because we have changed the geometry. And we can see we need to move these out because they're going straight through the plastic here into the barrel, which is not good. So you can see how much difference there is from a front and the back barrel. I mean, it would be interesting to see how this thing actually looked taken apart, because I don't think it should be that kind of a difference. So this is, you can see here, I tried the boolean at first, and you can see at the back here where we have the rounded geometry, which, I mean, it would work fine, but it's such a huge amount of wasted vertices for something which is going to be hidden. So I remove the boolean here, and then you can see I'm adding just these small cuts, which I think is the better option, because like we said, we're going to reduce the amount of geometry we're going to be creating for ourselves. Good old fashioned cutting. So we hide this piece here so we don't get confused. So here we just extrude down and then fill it. So as you can see, it's very square, low geometry. Nobody will know the difference because it's hidden. So that piece should be fine, but we do need to still take away the front piece. And we're going to do kind of like a halfway house here, because you can see there's a rounded cut at the front here, and we definitely need that because it's going to be way too difficult to cut that by hand. So we're going to just do a little makeshift round piece here. So we're going to just cut in just at the beginning, so we have a little bit less geometry, but it's still rounded. Essentially a bit of a 3D cheat. Don't do more than you need to do. Just trying to stitch things together and resolve the geometry. And then I think I came to a point where it kind of felt like the best option would just be to drag this all the way back anyway. Just for the time being. Because it is the simplest solution to stitch this together, but when we add the slices at the top, then we're going to bring it forward a little bit. So we're making progress. I mean, this is looking pretty good from the outside now. So now we're just moving things to the side to make sure we actually do have some kind of spacing here. The plastic doesn't always sit completely flush to the surface. It helps us to have a little bit of spacing here, so we allow in some shadow. Just like in real life, the plastic will never sit that flush unless, I mean, we're talking high quality goods like maybe iPhones, Samsung phones, where they're almost like so close that they're water resistant. So here, just trying to make things work. I kind of wonder how I used to make things. It was very much of the thought before that I tried to make everything to quads, which you could do here, but I mean it would be a huge amount of geometry to make this into a circular cut like this into quads. And essentially it doesn't make any difference, because as long as you have a flat surface and the mesh is not being deformed like a character, like if you're making like a character who's going to walk and move, then yeah, I mean quad base geometry is obviously essential. But when you're making hard surface, something which is just completely flat, and I mean you could pretty much do what you want to do. The only thing you really need to worry about is sometimes when you import the mesh into a external program, maybe Marmoset, it doesn't always like terrible geometry. So I need to be a little bit mindful of that. Then also, if you are going to sell your models, the less vertices you have is also a good thing. If people are going to use it in videos, films, games, as lower the better, really. So you can see we are just working around the mesh, trying to collapse anything which is unnecessary. So this piece here is a bit of a problem. I mean, you can see the placement was maybe not so great. And I do not like it at all. So as a good solution, I go to another piece of a mesh and fix some more things while I consider and debate in my own head how I'm going to solve the issue. Procrastination is always fun. And so we return. And the solution is delete it. And we shall copy one more and try again. See if we can get a placement which makes a little bit more sense. Essentially we want the two vertices to kind of land right on that seam. It would save us a lot of problems. And I'm not too sure, maybe it looks like this in real life, maybe it's a little bit lower. But it's fine for us, I think. So we end up a little bit above this seam. Yeah, I'd say that piece is kind of looking okay here. Maybe a few changes later just to put things a little bit neater. What we want to do now is focus on this piece up here, and we do not want a hole underneath it, so that's why we end up moving this forward. So we're working on like a stable base here. And always cleaning up as we go. When we create more geometry, it's always good to just delete anything along the way. Collapse stuff, save vertices. Just checking the non-manifold to make sure we have no internal faces. And this is shouting non-manifold, and it looks like it's because our normals are inside out here. So we recalculate the normals. It's good now and again just to check the non-manifold. So now this top piece, and the best thing to do is try and to just first put all these pieces together so this solid piece of geometry makes sense, and then we will try and attach it. And we can see we still have a little bit of overlapping here. So we'll just use our snap function to move it forward and snap to the next vertex. And our knife tool is not working here. So we add a edge loop instead, snapping to the edges, and then we can merge by distance. There's a slight mistake here. Really, we should be removing all these faces at the bottom underneath, because they will cause us problems later. So if you are building along, so here what we're doing is just adding edge loops to connect the geometry together, so we don't have any loose vertices. It is a little bit of legwork, unfortunately. But I mean, you could maybe just try and work out how to extrude these from the initial mesh, but that would be I feel a more painful process than what we're doing here. Here we're just essentially connecting edges. Here we're just trying to solve one problem at a time. So here we have some internal faces, obviously, because they were 9 pieces which were connected together, so we need to get rid of the internal faces. This can be the downside sometimes of the Boolean workflow, the irritating cleanup. But we have tools to help us. So here we can see non-manifold because we have a vertices here which is not connected. Then nothing here saying non-manifold. So it looks like we've succeeded with that piece. So now we need to connect it here instead. And again, clean up. But the plus side is that we will have less geometry, and also because we're using array modifiers and whatnot, we're getting some very, very consistent sizes in our mesh. Yeah, I mean there's more than one way to skin a cat. While we're doing cleanup here, I did put a shout out on my YouTube channel. I'm not sure if many people go in and look at the blog posts, but I was wondering, right now we're on 2x speed for this video. Essentially, if I would have put this to 1:1 speed, I think we would be up on maybe 3 hours, maybe a bit more. So I was kind of just wondering what people would like best. I mean, would you prefer to have 1:1 speed where I'm just kind of sat down talking as we going through it, or would you prefer this double speed because we get through more work, essentially? I mean, I don't like to put out too longer videos, so this would maybe be a 3-part video if it wasn't for the speed up. So it kind of depends what people think is best, if they would prefer to have a little bit slower. Obviously I could speed up parts like this where we're just stitching things together. If it was slow down 1:1 speed, maybe I would have a little bit more time to explain in detail what I'm doing. The idea from the beginning was maybe not that I would walk everybody through holding their hand. The videos would be more of just how I go about building things and seeing my workflow and the kind of details that I think are important. But if you are watching this, and I mean, either leave a comment or maybe go to the blog, and there's a voting button there if you want to throw your vote out there. But I mean, you know, I'm doing this for you guys essentially, so if you think it would be better slow down, say. If you think you're happy with how it is right now, say. Otherwise I don't know. So right now we're still just trying to clean up this mesh, deleting internal faces. But I can say this is pretty much the last of the hard work. This is without a doubt the hardest piece of a model. If you do think things are going too fast, obviously you have the possibility to slow down the video. There's still a few internal faces we need to get rid of. And then I think we're pretty much home. So yeah, looks okay. Maybe we could do a bit more cleanup, but nothing we need to do right now. So as we can see in textured mode, it's looking okay. In here we can move this back a little bit. We're going to have a little glass piece, or glass textured piece. I don't think it's going to be so visible. So now the last thing we do, we'll jump over and just do the trigger, which should be a very simple procedure. Pretty much the easiest piece we're going to do here. And again, just eyeballing these curves. And here we just fix the geometry a little bit, so we don't need to have so many angons. And then we add our bevel. And we can see what we need here. I think we're probably going to go for eventually the subdivision surface instead of... It's still quite low geometry, so I don't think it's really going to work so well if we just went for smooth by angle. Yeah, I think it's too low. And this looks a lot better. If you're making this for the game industry, then maybe it would have been better just to go a little bit higher geometry and try and avoid the subdivision surface altogether. And just go the shade smooth. So here we want to add some depth, so our crease down the middle, we actually catch some light there. Again, this is a part that a lot of people may have skipped when making models, but I think is extremely important. It really does add the extra bit of realism. And here we just fill and do an inset and just do a little bit of cleanup from anything which is left over. And we do need to just fill in some gaps here and also just add our bevel weight to the corners. So here I'll try to just add on the crease to see if that would give us a good effect, which I don't think it really does. I don't think it looks so nice, so I quickly abandon it and I go back over to the bevel weight. So here we need to just pull it apart so we can add some space in between here. It's way too tight right now. Clipping needs to be off so we can pull it apart. See here, we're not getting such a great effect. We need to get rid of this crease, modify it and go through the bevel. But here I'm just trying, just seeing how it looks. Here at least we definitely need to tighten up these corners. And you can see some dodgy shading at the back here, which will disappear. Just trying to work out how to attach this edge, because there needs to be something in here. And here I finally abandon the crease and just go back to what we were doing before, where we had the bevel then. So now we're starting to approach the last few minutes of the video. This is part 1 of 2. We will jump back and do the next part, which will, as I said before, the handle and the cable, at very least maybe even, well, I mean, it's very simple, a glass per plastic kind of laser glass, I guess, which completely is invisible at the end result. So we just need to make sure we do this inset here on both sides of the plastic. And this will finish up our video. Thanks for watching. I'll let the video roll out here, and we'll see you in a few weeks with part 2.